Hello and welcome back. Before we get to part 2, Real Talk, please allow us to fulfill our capitalistic duty and plug our Patreon, the Contrarians Supplements.
That's right. For a small fee, you too can help the Contrarians rage on.
We have tiers ranging from just $1 to $10. It all depends on how much content you can handle.
Starting at $1, it's the Travoltis tier, which gets you access to new bonus episodes focusing on a new movie every month, as well as access to the patron chat. Join other patrons in making fun of our opinions.
Moving up to $3 is the Winoni's tier, which unlocks access to our pre-recording notes, our video reviews, and our spin-off show, Contrarians After Hours.
That's a more laid-back space where we talk about other things we've been watching, reading, playing, thinking about. Sometimes it's related to the movies being covered in the main feed, but it usually isn't.
If you want to be part of those patrons who help us shape the show by telling us which movies to tackle, that's when you sign up for the $5 tier, the Embries, and the $10, the Gads.
Finally, all supplement subscribers, regardless of the tier, get access to our archive of special patron projects. Head over to patreon.com/contrarianprime now to join.
Be sure to listen through the end of the episode to find out what's coming up to the Contrarian Supplements this month. Now, it's time for some Real Talk.
I'm not Spider-Man. I mean, what would make you think that I was Spider-Man?
Peter Washington?
Yeah?
The fact that you, disappear out of nowhere for no reason?
No, I was sick. Remember I had the tummy?
You know Susan Yang thinks that you're a male escort?
What? No, of course I'm not a male escort.
Well, then you're Spider-Man.
No, I'm not Spider-Man at all.
Well, what about tonight? You snuck off and you fought that thing. I saw you.
You can't have seen me because I'm not Spider-Man. And also on the news, it was the Night Monkey.
The Night Monkey?
Yeah, that's what it said on the news. And the news never lies.
Night Monkey, okay.
What are you doing?
Well, do the Night Monkey and Spider-Man use the same webs?
I mean, maybe. Maybe he's a spider monkey, who knows? Were you only watching me because you thought I was Spider-Man?
And we're back here to discuss the 2019 American superhero film. Oh boy, budget of $160 million. Box office of, like I said, over $1 billion. Over $1.1 billion. Directed by John Watts, written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers. Released 4th of July weekend, July 2nd of 2019. That'd be cool for like a fan like you, though, and so many others, to have the Endgame come back in April, and then I don't remember any. Was there any teaser towards this? Had there been?
On Endgame,
obviously this
no.
Okay, yeah. Obviously this movie had been announced, but do you recall if there had been like a full-length trailer that had come out yet?
I think there was, but not like... I mean, it's kind of like what you said in the trailer's corner when you were talking about how the marketing was trying to avoid the giving away that Tony Stark dies in Endgame, which is a big thing in this movie. So yeah. I know that we knew that Mysterio was going to be the bad guy for a while. Well, we knew that Jake Gyllenhaal had been cast as Mysterio. That was something else that the marketing tried really hard not to say, which was that Mysterio was a bad guy. And of course, everybody was like, well, Mysterio is a bad guy. So, I think, you know what? And we'll find this out when we record the video for YouTube. But I think the trailer paints Mysterio as a good guy. You know, it just shows you the heroic bits. And that's why people like me were scratching their heads. I'm like, what? Mysterio's never been a good guy. At least not that I know of. So, but yeah, it was, I mean, it was at that point, if you were hooked to the MCU train, like you were just taking it. Like, give me more. What else is coming out? Tease or no tease?
So even after Endgame, I guess that's why I'm kind of surprised that this came out in such quick succession. But like I said, for people like you, and I don't mean Peruvians, I mean fans of the franchise and whatnot, I don't know. Did you feel like you needed more of a respite, or were you like all gung-ho by the time this came out?
I was all gung-ho because I never thought of it as what happens after Endgame. I mean, that I found out when I watched the movie. what I thought is, oh, this is what happens after Spider-Man Homecoming. So it was very different from what we got. Like, my expectations were different because, I'm always down for a Spider-Man movie. Whether it's connected to the Avengers and the bigger picture or not. So that was fun. If we had Endgame and then a few months later we'd had like Avengers 4 or Avengers 5 or whatever, that would have felt probably like, why are we rushing it? But to me, this was just what was going to happen whether Endgame was there or not, which was another Spider-Man movie. I mean, Homecoming was what, 2018? 2017, right?
Yeah, it was a ways before.
Yeah, so in that sense, it was like, oh, it's been 2 years since the last Spider-Man movie, which was huge and which promised a sequel, right? Marissa Tomei found out that he was Spider-Man. What happens next? and now we know. She starts pimping him out to charity.
I guess so. Anyway, we're here going back to 2019, a simpler time, a more innocent time, if you can believe it. 91% Julio. So most people were pretty pleased with what they saw upon release of this. What quotes did you pull from people who maybe not shared the same sentiment?
All right, some rotten quotes now from the Rotten Tomatoes website. We're going to start with Sudan Atlaka from Slash Film, who says, Marvel's 23rd entry, Alex, feels not like an epilogue to the main story, but a request for a clean slate, a plea for its audience to forget the failings of its films and characters and to instead accept their iconography at a distance. I don't know what the fuck this guy's talking about.
Yeah, I got really bored really quick.
How is this a clean slate when it keeps referencing stuff that happened in previous movies?
I can't tell you, man.
No,
these are your folks.
This is no folk of mine, because he should have just said the 23rd movie fails to end the story and instead continue. But he's talking about a clean slate. I don't think he got the movie. Andrew Kendall from Stay Broke News. It's funny. Like the sound cue that opens it, Far From Home meets every chance for sincere examination of emotion with a dismissive shrug or an irreverent joke, becoming a bland, exhausting product moonlighting as a movie. Alex, this is a criticism that I usually throw at, you referenced them earlier, the guys behind the Lego movie, even somewhat behind Into the Spider-Verse. Mm-hmm. They just can't have true emotion because they have to undercut it with a joke. And I don't think that that's what they're doing here. I think that there are some... I talked about it in Contrarians Corner. They let Happy Hogan well up in tears at his eyes, and there's no joke there. Yeah. Unless you consider them playing the song from First Iron Man a joke, which I thought it was. I guess Peter calling it, saying that he likes Led Zeppelin, that's kind of a...
Yeah, that was... I chortled.
Next, Ruben Rosario from Miami Art Scene says, the bad news is that the cast that surrounds them continue to be insufferable Gen Z cliches, and watching their slim storylines play out felt to this reviewer like nails on a chalkboard. Plus, none of these actors look like high schoolers anymore. I mean, that's never been a problem in Hollywood.
They have a workaround.
That's true. Well, no, they're supposed to not have aged because they were blipped. Unless he's talking about Brad.
Oh, okay.
Insufferable Gen Z cliches, Alex. Are they? I mean, Zendaya, maybe? Like this Mary Jane is Gen Z Mary Jane as opposed to Kirsten Dunst, but...
It is, but that's... My issues with the movie are not anywhere near revolving around the issues with Gen Z or, that type of shit.
We didn't even mention him. I feel bad because I feel bad for the actor because he's, Tony Revolori. He plays Flash Thompson. And Flash Thompson is a big character in the Spider-Man comics. He has never been a big character in the movies. This is probably, I guess, the biggest he is. And even then, he's just kind of a secondary comic relief character. He's the guy, he's Flash, the bully. That's what loves Spider-Man, always picking up Peter. When I say I feel bad, it's because he is the lead. Him and Ray Fiennes are co-leads in the Grand Budapest Hotel. So,
okay.
Yeah, so that was his big break. And then they move him to the MCU and he's playing, I don't know, fifth fiddle. It's like Ned, Betty, Zendaya, Peter, MJ, Peter. They all they're all the real classmates. I think even Brad gets more screen time than Flash Thompson. But I bring him up because he's doing he has his live stream channel. Is that Gen Z? Is that like a Gen Z thing? Is that what got under Ruben Rosario's craw? Like that, man, these fucking TikToks over in Europe.
I guess, but for me, like I said, not enough to cause any issues.
What's up, Flash Mob? How you guys doing? I'm here in St. Marco Polo's. Oh!
Well, let's close with Tim Brayton from Alternate Ending, who says the epilogue to Avengers Endgame first, and Iron Man 4 second, and a Spider-Man vehicle only when it cannot find a reason to be one of the other things.
Well.
I brought it up in Contrarians Corner. It is something that I know people say. And it is accurate in a way, but it's also... It was more prevalent around the time the movie came out. A bunch of people being annoyed, maybe because of those expectations that we're just talking about, right? I went to see Spider-Man Far From Home thinking, well, it's a Spider-Man movie, so it's really going to be about following up on what happened in Homecoming, which it does, I think. But it also has a lot of follow-up from what happened in Endgame, which makes sense because these movies are taking place in the same world. Endgame ended with Tony Stark dying, and Tony Stark was a big part of this Spider-Man's life. I mean, he's a big part of Homecoming too, so it makes sense. One of the things that I was going to bring up in Stretch Corner, I completely forgot, was I was going to tell you, like, Alex, doesn't it bother you that they basically turn Tony Stark into Uncle Ben for the purposes of this Spider-Man, right? Because
it's true.
Yeah, I mean, he never sees. We never see what made him become a Spider-Man in the MCU. When we meet him in Civil War, he makes allusion to something, right? That I had these powers and I could have done something, but I didn't do it, and that's why I do what I do. And they kind of left it floating there. And then Homecoming happened, and we thought that we're at least going to get a flashback to when he lost Uncle Ben, but we didn't. And then Far From Home happened, and I remember my thought was, well, I guess we're never getting that Uncle Ben flashback because Tony Stark is his Uncle Ben. Like, that's really like the guilt and the inspiration or whatever. Whenever he's going to think of with great power comes responsibility, the closest we're going to get is him, thinking of Tony the way that he thinks here. It doesn't bother me. It's just something that I noticed, and I was like, all right, well, I guess that's what this version of Spider-Man is. Just like when I think of this version of Spider-Man, I just go like, oh, so this version of Spider-Man is the one that's really close with the Avengers, and it has like ties to the Avengers and its stories and whatever, I'm like, if I want, now that we're in real talk, if I want the classic Spider-Man that is just kind of like swinging around New York and there's no big cataclysmic things happening, it's just him punching robbers and, he fights a Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus, but it's all like relatively grounded compared to like a major MCU adventure. Well, I have those Sam Raimi movies that I love. So I was happy to see that they decided to go with a different take on the character here. It doesn't bother me. But I understand like the people that were like, oh, it's going to be a new Spider-Man movie, and maybe this is where we get Spider-Man. The Homecoming had Iron Man, but now Iron Man is dead. So this movie is going to be just about Spider-Man. And instead it's like, holy shit, it's about Spider-Man, not Spider-Man dealing with the death of Iron Man. Dealing with the fallout of a lot of Avengers stuff. I understand the criticism. I don't share it. I don't know, because you kind of seem to like be sympathetic to those complaints when I was putting them out in Contrarians Corner. But does it bother you that this is not 100% a Spider-Man movie, and it's more like, I would say, 75% Spider-Man, 25% Avengers / Iron Man?
Gonna be honest with you, I didn't get that far to it in my thinking. I was so bored with this movie, dude.
Oh my god. Where's your sense of joy, Alex?
And even like the action sequences are just too much. It's just too much happening, man. Like, it's overkill, and we have Jake Gyllenhaal doing this bullshit, which is
Does it bother you that it's Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, it does.
So if it was somebody else, if it was just some rando playing Mysterio, it would go down a little easier.
I mean, the movie, I would still find the movie boring, but like when it would come back to him, I'm like, man, and I know I'm wrong. He made a lot of money from this, and like I said, no one makes him do this shit. With the Marissa Tomei thing, like I think I said this when we talked about Homecoming, it's like, yeah, she's Aunt May. She's in it like a little bit, but it's not like she has this big, part where she has to have like these big reaching moments of acting. And so, I can kind of justify that or rationale it in my mind. With Jake Gyllenhaal, doing all that shit with the drones and whatnot. I don't know if he has kids or whatnot, so this might have been a fun movie for him to make for them, but this is a guy from fucking Zodiac. This is a guy from Source Code, This is...
Prisoners.
Prisoners, for Christ's sake. Yeah.
Donnie Darko.
Well... I like Tom Holland. I like him as Peter Parker. I like Zendaya. You might be onto something that I wasn't even registering consciously of just like... This isn't really a Spider-Man movie. It's like a movie that's called Spider-Man, but it's also trying to pick up the pieces of like the entire franchise because it's the first thing that came out after Endgame. Whatever it is, doesn't work for me. And shockingly, I'm not going to rail on the runtime because I didn't really feel it when it was over. I was like, okay, yeah, because you kind of know what you're getting into with these movies. It's just at no point could I find myself getting invested in anything that was happening. I was just very, very bored.
I would have thought that at the very least, the Peter MJ will they, won't they playful relationship would have somewhat hooked you. Like if nothing else, Alex is going to enjoy the romantic comedy side of it.
I didn't hate it.
I mean, you like Zendaya. I mean, you were not lying, I'm guessing, in Contrarians Corner. Like she was a highlight.
Yeah, she's good. I'm now realizing as I'm talking through my feelings closer to kind of what you were saying, maybe I just wanted more of the classic Peter MJ story. And this movie was too determined to do these really long sequences of illusion and talk about Tony Stark and shit. Like, man, I don't know. This is like going to our John Cena Rock mega series with our patron. I don't know how the fuck you people in the MCU fandom are not just sick of Iron Man and sick of Robert Downey Jr. and sick of Tony Stark. It's just, I guess that's gone away. Is that?
Well, no. Okay. No, I was going to say it goes away in the sense that it's not like every movie after references it, This one happened right after Endgame. It had to reference it.
Not to the degree that it goes on here. He's basically a character without being in the movie.
Everywhere I go, I see his face. And the whole world is asking who's going to be the next Iron Man. I don't know if that's me happy. I'm not Iron Man.
Yes, but some people complain about that. So that there was some of the backlash when this movie came out. That's why I was so surprised about 91%. But I guess, a lot of those fans that were complaining were not Rotten Tomatoes critics. They were just like, enough with the fucking Iron Man already. In fact, some of the complaints with Homecoming were like, why is Iron Man here? Right. And I know the marketing answer was, well, because he's the one that everybody loves and he's the one that started the whole thing. So we need to make sure that everybody comes and loves the Spider-Man movie because the last two that we did with Andrew Garfield was not great. So, we have Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man here, Anchor becoming, the Uncle Ben figure, the parental figure and whatever. Well, once you've established that, you can't kill him off on Endgame and then have a Spider-Man movie where he's not feeling bad about it. But yeah, I mean, there were people that were like, why? Why are we still talking about Iron Man? I don't, especially now that we're so far removed from it, I don't care. It's because they did build the MCU. Those first 20 something movies were mostly built around him. It started with him, ends with his sacrifice, and most characters have a connection with him. So I think logically it makes sense. And obviously, from a financial sense, it also.
Yes. But as someone who liked Homecoming, I don't remember having an issue with him in that. But it was just like, he's dead. Let's
let him rest.
Because one of the things that yields in this that was my checking out point in the movie is when he gets the Edith glasses and there's like that comedic sequence of him figuring out how to use it. And I was like, fuck off. Like, this is what you do in the first Spider-Man movie, in every first Spider-Man movie, the sequence of him figuring out how to use his powers played to comedic effect or, whatever, emotion that you want to prey on. And then just doing that entire thing again in the second movie. No, sir. No time for that. That entire fucking sequence on the bus where he calls on the drone strike and then has to call it off. That whole thing, I was just like, this is so lazy and so transparent. That really.
But it's so funny, Alex. He punches Flash. Dude, I laughed out loud because I've forgotten. I haven't seen this movie like beginning to end since it came out. So there was a lot of stuff that I've forgotten. And I had forgotten that he needs to get the glasses of Flash, and so he punches him. And then that other girl's like, did you just punch Flash? Here's the thing. Here's why I enjoyed the movie and you didn't. In addition to like all the other stuff, I think it's really funny. So I don't really like when I watch Far From Home. It might have applied to Homecoming too, but I haven't seen Homecoming in so long. I experience them as comedies first, like above all, because even the action sequences, they have humor to them because he's just so, he's a kid and he's so frantic. And so I was laughing through the entire movie, and that sequence in particular, I mean, it's just a comedy, so it's like watching a Jim Carrey movie and then complaining because he's making faces or something. I was like, well, that's what we do. It's like Tom Holland Spider-Man is funny and he does these things. He's like, he panics and he's clumsy and he does those. So you were not laughing. I mean, I'm guessing that was a big problem. You didn't find this amusing.
I'm pretty sure anything I laughed at, I called out in Contrarians Corner in the first half there. No, I didn't really find this very funny or charming. It mostly, sad is too dramatic of a word, but I was mostly just like, okay. Which, again, I can't believe I'm not harping more on the runtime, but because it was just like everything that happened, I was like, sure, let's move it along here and see what's in. I guess I was interested to see how it was going to conclude. And I do kind of like the spin at the end of now Peter, what's going to happen because Peter's, public enemy number one. But nothing to sink my teeth into, nothing to. And man, putting myself in your shoes, going to see this after Endgame, I'm thinking of like, in my mind, did you just go in assuming it was going to play it safe and everything was going to be fine? Because that also would be like there's no real suspense here because we just came off of Iron Man dying, so they're not going to do anything with Spider-Man.
But see, that's not a requirement for me when I'm watching these movies, but it's funny you bring it up because that is something that I've constantly, like I get into this all the time now, but whenever I decide to engage with people online that have complaints and want to argue, which is less and less frequent these days, but there's a section of fans or the people that watch specifically, MCU movies that feel like an MCU movie is worthless or lesser than if it's not advancing some bigger plot, moving it forward, and so kind of like taking it back, like it's like, well, who died in this one, or what big world-changing event happened in this one, and so there are some specific things specific movies that people would point at and be like, well, basically, if you can skip it and just move on to the next Marvel movie and not miss anything, then it's not really worth it. It's kind of like why some people look down on the Ant-Man movies. And I'm like, but the Ant-Man movies are fun. They're just funny. It's Paul Rudd being funny, and going on a heist and whatever, And so the Spider-Man movies are kind of like the same for me in the sense that I just want to watch Spider-Man do Spider-Man stuff, which he does here and he did in Homecoming, and spoiler alert, he does in No Way Home. It's if you read Spider-Man comics, going back to what I was saying about how it plays out, like in the comics, not every adventure that Spider-Man has is just like this world-shattering crisis, right? Like sometimes he's just doing stuff that's entertaining, And so this movie is just that, he goes to Europe and he meets Mysterio, he fights Mysterio, he defeats Mysterio. Like the biggest thing that happens is like the teaser for the next movie, which is like, oh shit, now everybody knows who he is. But no, it doesn't bother me. I mean, it was like, it would bother me if Avengers Endgame had like some sort of inconsequential feel, because that's something that you're building up to, right? And in a way, it would bother me if the next movie, No Way Home, went to the places that it goes, and then it ended up feeling like, well, that was it. Like there's, we could have just not done it and it would all be the same. But no, with this, I mean, it's just, it honestly, and it was confirmed by me watching it because, like I said, I haven't watched since it came out, and I've had several years of listening to the discourse of people saying like, yeah, Far From Home kind of sucks. Far From Home is
I don't know about the kinda in that sentence.
Well, I'm talking about like MCU fans. But I was watching it today and was like, this is a good Spider-Man movie. This is what a Spider-Man movie is. He's funny. He's having trouble. Like, the core, one of the core attributes, one of the core characteristics of the Peter Parker character is that nothing goes his way. And so this movie is just a series of things not going his way and him getting into deeper trouble as he tries to do the right thing. And then every now and then something pans out, and this time he gets the girl. And then, of course, immediately gets into bigger trouble because his identity is exposed. So, man, this nails it. It didn't need to like kill a major character or have like 1% of the world's population disappear or anything. It's just a fun movie. It's like a comedy, a road trip movie. It just kind of like ticks all the boxes. And I wonder, like, what would it be like if you remove the Endgame references that maybe keep reminding people, oh, but remember there's a bigger superhero universe that does big things. Because then maybe that kind of makes it feel like it's a little lightweight. But man, lightweight is good. Lightweight is great when it's pulled off as well as it does here.
Oh, I'll tell you from experience, perfume allergies are no joke. I can feel hives breaking out already. MJ, stand up. Ned, take MJ's spot. MJ, you take my spot. Peter, come with me. Let's get you out of there.
Sorry.
Zach and Sebastian, you take Ned and Peter's seats.
You're like, I don't like lightweight.
No, that is categorically incorrect. But what was it? What did you say? 23rd? This was the 23rd movie or whatever in that? All right. Find your lightweight somewhere else, man. Like you can't...
Actually, that's exactly when you need the lightweight. You just had Avengers Endgame, which was
you don't need 23 movies in a franchise to begin with. But
this is phase 4, Alex. It's easing us into the next thing.
I'm kind of surprised it's not like more universally like divisive because people are not as eternally optimistic or specific to, superhero movies. You can get, I've heard it's documented in our history. You can get mad about them, but you're usually a bit more forgiving than like I or, most people. So I'm surprised that I'm surprised that there's not like a stronger contingent of people be like, what the fuck was the point of this movie? Like that have become so spoiled by like the perceived epicness of things like Infinity War or Endgame because that's the whole fucking point, man. It started lightweight. Iron Man, Hulk, Thor. It was Captain America, And then we had the epic of the Avengers. And it was fun. And we were still a proper nation at that point in time. A proper world, dare I say. And then it just kept going and going to the point where these movies like Civil War, Infinity War, and fucking Endgame, you can't make movies like that in a franchise and then just expect people to go back to just tedium.
But that's really what serialized storytelling is, and those things that just run forever.
Yes, I understand that. That's how you have television shows and comic books and music is like that too.
Like I could tell you, why would you keep The Office going after Jim and Pam got married, right?
Well, if you talk to people that know what they're talking about, they shouldn't have. But no, it's that after the day after WrestleMania this past year, I'm like, where the fuck do we go from here? Like this is, Cody Rhodes finally won, Roman Reigns got beat, and like in the fashion they did it, it was like,
but
where do we?
You wouldn't have gotten that if you had stopped at which one's your favorite? 30, WrestleMania 30. Right?
Yeah. That's safe to say.
You could have ended it there. And it was like, why do we keep going? And it's like, well, because, you kind of like reset, you shuffle around the pieces, and then you start building up to the next thing.
Yeah. I guess what I was trying to say from this is just I'm surprised that this movie appears to be so universally beloved, where as just from looking from the outside in, I could see someone being like, the fan base more than I do. I imagine they're pretty hard to please.
Well, but that's what I was telling you. That's why the 91% surprised me. But I guess the 91% is coming from critics who are maybe a little more. I think if you don't have that much skin in the game, then you can just watch this and be like, yeah, that was a fun movie watching it, starring Spider-Man. I've told you, like I was saying, I know that the discourse is out there, and I engage with it less and less, but it's there. The people that just rail against movies like Spider-Man Far From Home or people, at least some people, I don't know what the tomato meter score is, but the latest, like the last Ant-Man, the third one, people were just like, why? It's like, because
Greg Turkington's in those movies though, so they're good with me.
Anyway, to your point, you're not wrong because your analysis is on point. It is the kind of movie that at the time and movies like it, creates a division because there are people that just want everything to be epic and they want everything to keep building up, which is just unrealistic. That's not how the stories work. You reach your climax and then you kind of reset and then you keep going. Otherwise, it just gets you just get numb. If every movie was an Endgame, if every movie was like a Civil War, I constantly remind people, it's like Endgame was great for those of us who felt it was great because there was like a nice buildup and you can look at the peaks and valleys getting you there. If every movie had been like Endgame leading up to it, it would have felt like, what? This is just what it is.
But still, that reward can be there, like with exponentially less. If there were 23 Star Wars movies, I'm not quite sure that fucking Force Awakens would have been quite as sweet. You know what I mean?
Right. But I think the trick is that you should shift gears after every big moment, right? Star Wars is a terrible example because they ran straight into the wall with the way they took that story. But in a perfect world, what they would have done is have a transitional trilogy that says goodbye to Luke, Han, and Leia, and sets up Finn, Rey, and Poe. And then you can have 3 more movies
so
with
promising.
them. Right?
It was
yeah,
so promising.
But they did. They completely fucked it up. But if they had done it right, like nobody would be complaining if episode 10. Yes. So if episode 10 was just an adventure where like Finn, Rey, and Poe are just, they go on an adventure and they have a good time, people wouldn't be like, well, but nobody died in this one. You'd be like, that's right. They passed the torch and now we're doing like something else. And look, there is an argument to be said that every movie, especially if you're adapting, I think specifically when you're adapting something that is a long-running series, well, the movie has to be at least a little bigger than the series because it's a movie, and kind of like what I was saying at Contrarians Corner, you only get to make a few of those, so you have to make them count. I think maybe it's easier to appreciate, and I'm not saying that this is on you or on anybody that complains about it, but it might be easier to appreciate the importance of Far From Home, if that's what you need. If you need importance to be bestowed on a movie for you to like really appreciate it, maybe it's easier to appreciate its importance once you have the third movie out, because then you realize that, oh, well, there's some things that we're laying the ground for here and that they pay off in the next movie. But at the time that you're watching it, if you don't know what's going to happen, you're just like, oh, well, that's it. Like, I think it's a huge thing that Peter and MJ get together in this movie. But that is not obviously world shaking, As a Spider-Man fan, you're like, oh, they got together. We all know that at some point that has to happen if it's a traditional way that they tell the story. I get it. I'm honestly surprised. No, I'm not surprised because you have a passion for a similar type of long form serialized storytelling. So of course you can recognize the patterns, not just in the stories, but also in the fandom and the reactions. So yes, you're right. I mean, this would be one of the issues.
And anyone who knows us and knows our tastes and stuff, there's 12 Friday the 13th movies and there's, 13 Halloween movies and shit? And my immediate argument would be none of those I would describe as epic necessarily, but of course the first Halloween, but
Freddy versus Jason, they all build up to the Freddy versus Jason Endgame, and then after that you're like, why are you making any more?
Yeah.
To Mysterio! To Mysterio! To Peter Parker! To Peter Parker!
Poor kid.
Interesting. Interesting perspective. It comes from, I think I've learned this as we've done this and as I've talked to people about this. There's like a sanctity and a level I want to hold film at that is different and greater than, wrestling, comic books, regular TV, like things like that. So when we talk about this, which to me is basically just like sitcom movies, it's just like, all right, this is the episode. And it's a little bit different in, any other type of film franchise really that you and I have lived through, and because there's just no end in sight. In a lot of ways it is different than, and these folks behind these movies figured that out pretty quick. It's comic books, it's episodic, never really ends.
I mean, I think I said it on the Endgame episode, but there is a built-in end in sight, because short of recasting, I mean, these are actors that are aging and they're mortal, so at some point,
well, you got AI coming along right now, so it'll be all right.
Well, yeah. That's Pandora's box. Let's not go there.
But because I can appreciate like Endgame, I'll just go back to something I own so I can speak to, like the first Avengers. I really appreciated what was done with that. Like I remember when those movies started coming out, like this is the idea, we're gonna do this and this and this. I was like, oh, that's cool. And it played out, and I still think the first Avengers is a hoot. And to me, from there, you just kind of dilute things and make things not matter and seem not as important when you just keep fucking going back to the well over and over again. And again, yes, Friday the 13th, but I'd argue that none of those were ever really important or never like felt like something big. But capitalism, I get it. These movies, this one we're talking about, made over $1 billion with a B. And these aren't things I like say in public, or they're not really, these aren't thoughts I spend time ruminating on in my real life. But when we do these episodes and stuff, they come back, and this is how I feel about it. And to be truthful, none of this came up when I watched Homecoming. I was like, that was delightful.
That was going to be my question. Yeah. Because if you ask me, the comedy in this movie is pretty much the same style of comedy as Homecoming, and the lightheartedness of it is also kind of like what was in Homecoming, right? Homecoming is, even with the Tony Stark, with the live Iron Man being part of it, it was kind of low stakes. It was just Peter having a crush on Liz Allen, fighting the Vulture, right? It was even tied into much like this one, it was tied into what was going on in the MCU, because I don't know if you remember, but the whole thing with the Vulture with Michael Keaton was that he was fucked out of a job by the Avengers, by Tony Stark. Yep. He was picking up the pieces of technology that was left over by the aliens from the first Avengers, all that stuff. It's so kind of like the formula that.
Yeah, we shouldn't understate how important it is to having Michael Keaton in your movie. That was
going to be my first guess. Is it just that it doesn't bother you to see Michael Keaton putting on the suit, but Jake Gyllenhaal really kind of like soured the experience for you?
With Keaton, it's just because he's Michael Keaton. It's like, yeah, fuck yeah, like yeah, let's Michael Keaton be a super villain. With Jake Gyllenhaal, I was like, that was part I just didn't believe it, but I really may have just brushed over it. I was extremely like annoyed by them just redoing the sequence of Spider-Man learning his powers again in the second movie. That seemed to tickle you because he punched the one fella in the face.
Well, it's just one of the like 20 things that happened in that sequence.
And that occupied less than 10 minutes of the movie. But to me, when I see something that lazy in a movie, I'm just like, fuck this, dude. Because then it makes me mad because I'm lazy and I don't have $1 billion. Because it doesn't make me mad. It makes me jealous is what it does, Julio.
I mean, it's not his powers. It's
the same fucking concept.
It's
dude.
Iron Man tech that then later he doesn't use. It's just like, I think it proves that he shouldn't have that tech. But I get what you mean. But still, that is like a little bit in the big pie. I mean, did you not like the heel turn, like the big toast? I remember loving it when I saw it in theaters, and when it was playing today, I was like, oh, this is so good. Like his acting. I mean, I think that moment, right, where he turns to the bad guy.
Yeah. That's the most he acts in this, and I audibly reacted to him going, "Someone get this ridiculous thing off of me," when he's talking about the costume. You know, if I was more married to the material, I probably would have been more annoyed about the idea of Mysterio, because it had me questioning. I was like, wait, I thought Mysterio was a bad guy. And, but, you know, it was just kind of, it was all a ruse. It was literal smoke and mirrors, you know?
I mean, it's literally, that is the kind of thing that Mysterio does in the comics. So I was like, all right, it works. And that was, when I was watching it, all kidding aside, I know that we're in real talk, I didn't know either. Because I was like, yeah, I know he's a bad guy in the comics, but this could go any number of ways, right? Because he's talking about being from a different dimension, a different Earth. So maybe on that Earth, Mysterio is a good guy, right? And then I was like, oh, maybe he's a good guy right now, but something's going to happen in the movie that's going to turn him into a bad guy. Or, of course, option 3 was no, it was Mysterio doing the Mysterio things all along. And I kind of liked what he was. We joked a little bit about it in Contrarians Corner, but the idea of like right now people will believe anything. That the events of the previous Marvel movies have driven society to the point where they can't distinguish what's real and what's not. They're just primed to believe anything. I mean, it was like, it's even more believable now because in real life, we just don't know what to believe, right?
Yeah.
You put it on social media and there's a pretty good chance that 50% of people that see it are just going to believe it without questioning it. So that was kind of like an extra bit of commentary, but I like what they did with the Mysterio character. I mean, there were people that were genuinely complaining about the fact that the movie spent so much time with him being a good guy, but I'd never have a problem with it.
Like I mentioned in Contrarians Corner, I just don't want to pay. I like his death scene and like his death rattle of like, now they won't know what to believe. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And it ties in with what he does at the end, or the big cliffhanger.
Yeah.
To Guterman. The story you created of a soldier from another Earth named Quentin fighting space monsters in Europe is totally ridiculous and apparently exactly the kind of thing people will believe right now. I mean, everybody bought it.
Great soundtrack. Vacation by the Go-Go's is legitimately one of my favorite songs of all time. So when it ended on that, I was like, Jason Segel watching Chocolat, just stupid. You know,
Whitney Houston at the beginning, were you being serious?
This Is the End killed that song to ever be used in a movie again for comedic purposes. Like, and I mean in a positive way, because that was so fucking funny in that movie. So they're all just second. They're fighting for second place at this point.
Have you seen The Bodyguard, like the movie that made that song?
Oh yeah.
Or arguably the song made that movie. I guess you see it either way.
Yeah, I would say that Kevin Costner. Yeah, and there's a Simpsons episode where Homer becomes a bodyguard, and that song plays at the end when he's like, I think he's rescuing Mark Hamill, and that's how it plays out. But yeah, that song's It's Been Done is what I thought to myself when that came up.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that it was there, and I'd forgotten what it led into. And then when I saw what it was leading into, I laughed.
Fair.
Jake Gyllenhaal, that was the other bit of trivia that I was not aware when I watched the movie, and then it made a lot of sense, or it added new layer when I found out. And that is that at some point he was supposed to replace Tobey Maguire in one of the Spider-Mans, I think on the second one, because Tobey Maguire had hurt his back. And so they were thinking that he wasn't going to be able to make the movie. So they had Gyllenhaal like on call, but then Maguire ended up pulling through. He did the movie, and so Jake Gyllenhaal missed out on being Spider-Man. And so a lot of people were talking about how like this was him finally getting into the Spider-Man universe, even though he was a villain. And there was a tiny viral video. I don't think TikTok was a thing back then, so it must have been just on Twitter or whatever, that was showing Jake Gyllenhaal reading a Spider-Man comic and realizing that Mysterio was a bad guy. And he just showed him his face, and he goes like, I don't know if he says what the fuck or like, wait, I'm a bad guy. He said something, and then it just cut. But it was pretty funny. And I was going to make the joke in Contrarians Corner about how you can tell in his interactions with Tom Holland, you can sense the longing for that costume. But he's saddled with the Mysterio costume instead. I think he's a good sport, and it must have been cool for him to just get to do something that, you know, kind of do something that he wanted to do all those years ago.
Yeah, that's fair. Like all that stuff I said earlier, it's just my own fucking preconceived notions and bullshit that I bring to it. So yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal listens to this and he's like, what the fuck is that guy's problem?
I love you, Jake. I want to party with you. Yeah, this is fine. It's not bad. Obviously, not to you. For me, it's like dead center, like C minus territory of just, I don't need to see this again. You could have explained this movie to me in 3 sentences probably. And for someone like you, this is the type of shit that works. And that was a really mean-spirited transition there. What I was trying to say, is
I've had worse.
If the point is, we're doing this. If we did not have a podcast and you went and saw this, I'd be like, what's it about? And you're like, well, Jake Gyllenhaal is Mysterio. He's a good guy, then he's a bad guy. Spider-Man wins in the end and gets MJ.
Well, I would have opened with like, do you know Mysterio from the comics?
I'd be like, yeah, he's a bad guy. You're like, so you think. But I was just aggressively bored. But at no point was I like, this sucks. It just did nothing for me, which was a bummer. You know, I'm making this all like dour and sound like this, this has no place. But again, just to remind myself and the listeners, I really enjoyed Homecoming. So I'm honest, we're back in the S. Craig Zahler territory of now I got to see the third one to see which one's like the anomaly, you know?
It would be interesting because you're right? Once we get to the third one, you can see what the third one has in common with Homecoming, what it has in common with Far From Home, and how you feel about the third one might help you suss out like what really works for you in the Spider-Man movie and what doesn't. And you know what? More interestingly, we're also going to talk about Andrew Garfield Spider-Man that you haven't seen, and so that might also kind of, man, if you end up loving Amazing Spider-Man 2, I'm just not going to know what to do with that information.
It does have Paul Giamatti in it, so we'll see.
With a Russian accent.
My God. I will say I like preemptively rolled my eyes at the notion of bringing all the Spider-Men back together. I don't like that. I don't like that whole trick of like, the Endgame thing, which because the ending of that's so like, like I said, epic, it's kind of worth it. But the whole idea of, well, Benedict Cumberbatch's here and he can open up portals. So now everyone's just around. But I'm interested to see how this story ends. The cliffhanger is what got me most interested. It's like, oh shit, now people are going to hate Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end of The Dark Knight. This is the Dark Knight's a much better movie than this, but it's the idea of
it is the end of Dark Knight.
Yeah, it is. It's like he's the bad guy, so we'll see. So I'm interested. C- for me on this. Again, I didn't find it bad. I found it unnecessary. But Julio, I did review yours and some of my our friends and some of the folks I follow on Letterboxd's reviews, widely ranging.
I told you.
There was yeah. Which again, the 91% is what caught me off guard, because I got on there and like Brandon Curtis gave this 1.5 stars, and one of my other friends gave it 1 star, and then I saw your review, which was 4.5. And does that still stand?
Yes, I think so. There's a part of me that wants to like give it 5, the full 5, because honestly, I had such a good experience that it's like if you had watched me watching this movie, you would walk away from it going like, why isn't it 5 stars? And back in 2019, I would have told you, well, because I had a great time, but I was never moved. And so maybe the 5 stars are like for the ones that moved me. I think it's the same reason why I gave Homecoming 4.5 too. Like, I think that movie's great, but I was just like, all right, that was fun. It kind of, in the end, I'm falling back on the things that people criticize. Like, why isn't it full 5? Because it's kind of lighthearted and it's not, the consequential ones are the ones that get 5 stars. Watching it tonight, I'll tell you this. That moment when Happy Hogan is watching Peter create the new costume and he gets teary-eyed and you can tell that he's thinking of Tony and thinking that Tony did the right thing by trusting this kid. I think that is just good. Like anybody who tells me that, you can tell me that you don't feel the emotion, but you can't tell me that the emotional moments are not built in there. It was like, okay, it can connect with you, it may not connect with you, but don't tell me that there is not a design in the story where you're like, yeah, this is the emotional payoff, right? And same thing, Homecoming has like a couple moments like that. I don't want to. There's something big that there's several things that I don't want to talk about, because I think also my feelings about this movie have to do with the third movie and how some things play out. Something that was bothering me, not bothering me, but something that I was like, what's missing, right? Homecoming and Far From Home. And I was, my fear going into No Way Home was like, are we really not going to see how he became a Spider-Man? Just funny, because you would think that, a common complaint, especially from a character that's been around for so long in movies like Spider-Man or Batman, Superman, it's like, do we need another origin story? We already saw it happen twice, 3 times.
I can tell you the answer.
Yes?
No.
Exactly. But then, you know what happens, Alex? When you don't have it, you feel that it's missing. Even though if you ask me, most people, we're like, all right, well, how will you do it to where it doesn't feel like you've seen this 1,000 times? They probably wouldn't be able to tell you how. But man, there is something, at least if you're a Spider-Man fan, there is something weird about watching 2 movies about, a new Spider-Man that you're just watching and not having the Uncle Ben side of it there.
Yeah.
It's just such an integral part of the thing. It's even worse than, because, you could make a Batman movie like Mask of the Phantasm, right? It never shows you his parents getting killed, but it acknowledges that his parents got killed. Here, with this Spider-Man, this is, he was in Civil War, he was in Infinity War, he was in Endgame, he was in Homecoming, now he's in Far From Home. And we've gotten like a kind of like a casual mention about like something that happened that made him take his power seriously. And that is such a key part of Spider-Man, the whole like with great power comes great responsibility, that when I was watching this, I was like, man, this might be all we get. His relationship to Tony Stark might be all we get in the sense of this is what makes him Spider-Man. And I like what they do with it, but I don't know if it's enough. And so that I remember being a thought that I had back when I was first watching them. And I thought that I had, as I was watching them now, I mean, I applaud them saying, fuck it, we're just going to jump into Spider-Man years. You don't need to see the wrestling and you don't need to see the Uncle Ben doing anything. And Aunt May is going to be hot. Fuck, just go all out. But it's a key piece of the character that feels like it should be there. So just like the general public hating Spider-Man is also a key piece of the mythology. So when this movie ends with him becoming public enemy number 1, that feels so right. You're like, they have a plan. They're going somewhere. Anyway, really long answer. I think it's 4.5 still. So
Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker.
What the
4.5 for me, C- for Alex. It's if you've watched it, you know how you feel, and our conversation hasn't swayed you. And if you haven't watched it, you're not gonna watch it. The only reason Alex watched it is because, like he said, we're doing this. So I'm happy. I'm happy that you engaged it and we had a good conversation about it.
Agreed. And speaking of doing this, that means we have a couple more parts to come in the Spider-Man little mini staycation we're doing here with Peter Parker. So Julio, lay out the short but loaded roadmap ahead.
All right. So before we get into the patron goodies, of course, main feed is, as we keep saying, No Way Home. The ending, at least so far, of the Tom Holland as Spider-Man story. I can't imagine anybody going into this movie not knowing that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are in it. If you didn't know and I just spoiled it for you, I mean, I'm sorry, but
tough titties.
Yeah. At this point, even if you went to watch it, I think the description and the poster they show on the thumbnails, like, it spoils it for you. Yeah. But Alex, I will just say this. When you watch it, try to keep in mind that we didn't know. There were rumors. People were suspicious about it. But a lot of it could have been internet bullshit. Like Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire.
Did you see that like opening night?
Not opening night, but opening weekend maybe. And
Did you do your thing where you were on a social media hiatus?
Dude, the worst part was that I was, at the time I was working for that website, that entertainment website. So I had to write about it.
Oh no.
It was a miracle that I didn't get spoiled. Because I just didn't want to. I wrote an article about all the theories and all the potential. So I was very aware of all the theories online, because even though I was not going looking for them, I had to go look for them because I had to write. Like, the article was literally like all the potential rumors about all the rumors about the new Spider-Man movie, and so I had to write about all that stuff. But that's how I found out that poor Andrew Garfield had denied it on 3 different interviews, like on camera. I was like, no, I'm not. I don't know how it happened that people started saying this, but I'm not in it. So what I was gonna say is, when you go watch it, I guess there are 2 things that you kind of have to remember. One, we didn't know. So we were going into it maybe thinking that it could happen, but we didn't know.
Yeah.
And number 2 is, we were not multiversed out. Like, the only thing that had happened at that point as far as superhero movies was Into the Spider-Verse, which was, it was animated and it was very different. It was a different set of characters. Now, look, I like the multiverse concept and multiverse movies more than I think the average fan, but...
Confirmed.
They really, it's not novel anymore, and it really feels like it's not exciting, and it makes me roll my eyes. The Flash movie did it, and I just it was just so bad. Now we're getting to real talk for next episode. Just think about that when you're watching it, if you can. Try to remember that it was not
the Flash one that had like George Clooney and Nicolas Cage and shit.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So that hadn't happened yet. The idea of somebody grabbing the 3 Spider-Man, the 3 live action Spider-Man, and putting them in a movie, it seemed like it was outlandish, like something that, how could you ever make that happen? So there really was a sense of awe when it happened. And everything else that happens in that movie, it was like, all the rumors, some came true and some didn't, but it was still it felt like something that was exciting. It didn't feel played out, which is how it could feel now. So try to keep that in mind. But that's for the main feed, Spider-Man No Way Home. On the Patreon feed, we're going to, for the after hours for this episode, we are going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is the second Andrew Garfield movie that Alex hasn't seen, and I've seen once in theaters, and then a few times I've had it play in the background whenever I want to laugh at it. So we're going to talk about that because I think it's an important transition into this Spider-Man. You have to see how Andrew Garfield's story had ended before he reappeared. You've seen, obviously, Spider-Man 3. We've talked about it. The one with Tobey Maguire, the last one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need a refresher.
Saw that in theaters. Yeah.
Yeah. And once you watch it, that one's like just emblazed in your mind forever. And then we are going to talk about a couple of comic books on the after hours for No Way Home. The Death of Gwen Stacy and the first volume of Ultimate Spider-Man. And we'll talk about that when we talk about that. But that's going to be on the after hours for this. Also on the Patreon channel, not Spider-Man related, but our bonus episode for this month is the movie Space Sweepers, requested by patron Ryan, which is a sci-fi comedy, I think, maybe. And I think it's a Netflix original. And then for QVR's patron Jason Nerdrovert is giving you Worst Person in the World, and he's giving me Memories of Murder. So we'll have individual video reviews this month. So that's it on the Patreon channel. If that sounds cool, go to patreon.com/ContrarianPrime to sign up. But that's it, Alex. Are you ready to sign out and go watch some J.K. Simmons, Alex Jones on your TV?
I am going to put that on to fall asleep to. I would listen to all the conspiracy theories in the world if it came from the dulcet tones of one J.K. Simmons.
It is your fucking tempo.
Welcome to our end credits.
Or as we usually call them, our perennial plugs.
We start off by giving thanks to the Festive Years who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand and take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend and fellow podcaster Hans Rothgieser is the man behind our logo and all the art you see related to our show. Reach out to him and let him know how much you like that little tomato. His email address is mildemonios@hotmail.com and his website is mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS. Hans, thank you for all your support.
For those interested in the regularly absurd world of professional wrestling, Joe and the boys over at latenightgrin.com have you covered. Tell them the Contrarians sent you.
And we like to close with special thanks to our social media team of Zoe Perez and Corey Ari. Each of the social media accounts we mentioned in the introduction look as good as they do because of their work.
So that'll do it for this episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
Just for old time's sake, I really don't care.